The men's dormitory at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the place that I would be spending the next 4 years of my life. That's right, we're back in that car. At the end of episode 6, I was sitting in the front seat of my father's Chevelle, coming back from my interview at Franklin and Marshall College. A successful interview. I've been accepted. And you know what? I was feeling kind of ambivalent. All right? Unsure, doubtful, of two minds. And in my case, more than two minds. I really didn't want to go to Franklin and Marshall and study psychology. I wanted to go to film school, but that was not in the cards. And this was the hand that I'd been dealt, and I was lucky to get into this school. It was a good school. If you didn't mind living in Amish country, we're 1,500 men, you know, no movie theaters and no record stores. That's what was ahead of me. And what also was ahead of me is the fact that when I got home, I thought that everything would be a little calmer now that I'd gotten into school, but no. My father was more distant than ever, and my mother and I, we pushed each other's buttons. Everything I said, she reacted badly to, and same here. It got so bad that I would just lock myself in my room and play my records as loud as I could, you know, or I'd go out and see my friends. And that was another thing that was making me feel ambivalent. As glad as I was to be out of high school, Fort Lee High School, there it is, I was going to be losing my friends to college and to other schools. Dennis Benson was headed towards Rutgers, and so was Eddie Cohn. Eddie Cohn and Dennis were going to be roommates together, and so was a lot of other friends from Fort Lee High School, Larry White and Bob Fink, and a lot of guys who I was, you know, tight with. And Teddy was headed to the University of Wisconsin, okay? So that left Susan and Leslie. So they were juniors. So Leslie Maitland had another year there, and then she ended up at the University of Chicago. Susan, same thing, but she ended up at Bennington. And this guy, well, I just didn't know what I felt. You know, I was happy that I was going to be leaving home, but it didn't sit well with me, and I had a summer ahead of me to figure out what I would do with the rest of my life. Now, thinking back on high school as I've been doing this has made me have a couple of really interesting thoughts about the school system that I was in and why it was so difficult for me. And one of the reasons was, it was something that we'll talk about in a second, is that there was no allowance for critical thinking. Critical thinking was not what the school system was interested in. The school system was interested in you getting the information that they gave, you absorbing it, putting it in your body, and spitting it back to them on tests, and this information would be frozen in amber forever. It was like they were in the 50s. I was more interested in taking this information and working it around inside my head and coming up with my thoughts on it, which is much more like the kind of school that my daughters go to now. But that's not what Fort Lee High School was interested in. And the first hint of that, there's two lessons I've got to talk about here. One was the first week of school, and one was the last week of school. In the first week of school, the teacher wanted to do something interesting. I mean, it was all these kids from all these other schools were now in Fort Lee High School together, and he was the English teacher. And after he got us all in alphabetical order in the classroom, I don't know, alphabetical order always makes me laugh. Anyway, he said, let's get to know each other. I've been going to talk all semester, and let's find out what you think. Okay, in the back, first seat, what's your favorite movie? I was like, she had to offer an opinion. Is this some kind of trick? Are we going to get graded on this? But she took a stab at it, and she says, West Side Story, which was actually, under pressure, really good choice, okay? Because the whole class went, oh yeah, West Side Story, good, you know. And the girl in front of her, who was so relieved to not have to make her own opinion, she says West Side Story, and then the third person says West Side Story. So now we got 3 West Side Stories here, and the next person is a guy, and he thinks and he says Lawrence of Arabia, right? Another great movie, and I'm thinking, that's a really good choice. I love Lawrence of Arabia. But then what happened is the next person, a guy, he says Lawrence of Arabia. So now all of a sudden, all ideas, originality, or offering a real opinion is off because it's boys against girls. And if the teacher had anything on the ball, he would have called it off right there and asked everyone everyone had to come up with a new original thought or explain why. That wasn't going to happen. So it starts going around the room, and they're headed towards the front, and I start thinking, getting inside my head, I really like Lawrence, but there's so many other movies that I really like, and I start thinking about it, and all of a sudden, it's my turn, and I look up at the blackboard, and it's a dead tie, okay? And I'm thinking, like, what movie would I say? And then it dawns on me, and I say, as much as I like both those movies, the movie that I like the best, that's my favorite movie, Rio Bravo. Oh, the whole class, right? Oh, Marcus, you always come up with something, You always give something, crazy. Why can't you just be, like everyone else, okay? I'm thinking John Wayne, Dean Martin, Ricky Nelson, Angie Dickinson. How could you not love Rio Bravo with Angie Dickinson? I mean, I've talked to you guys about this before, but no one was seeing it my way in that classroom, and I should have known that from then on, things were going to be out of kilter for me, because that is like a moment that's very typical of what the rest of high school was to me. Anything that I liked, that I had a strong opinion on, was outside the realm. So let's go to the last week of high school, right? And in that week, the teachers and the school principals had by then witnessed the changes that were going on in the school over the course of the 4 years. So now, here we are, and it's the next to the last day of high school, right? And all we got to do is like come in and sign our yearbooks or something, and then the next day is going to be half a day, and that's it, goodbye. So my friends and I think, why don't we do this for? And we did something we'd never done before. We decided that we were going to skip school. We had never actually played hooky before. I mean, a Jewish holiday, we went to temple for the 2 hours, and the rest of the day we had off. But, a doctor's one. But this was, fuck it, we're not going to school, right? That's cutting school. So we met at Ted's house, and we did what we always love to do at Ted's house, is we listened to the 2,000-Year-Old Man albums and anything Mel Brooks had done with Carl Reiner, and all was right with the world. And listen, I can't recommend 2,000-Year-Old Man high enough, Anyway, so, but, after about 3 or 4 hours of this, I mean, we've only heard these albums 200 times. We decided, well, we're bored. Let's go to the school and see what's going on. Maybe the yearbooks are in. Not giving it a second thought at all. And so we walking around the outside of the school, and, some of the windows are open, and we're talking to kids through the open windows, and, yearbooks we hear, and out of nowhere, these 3 guys show up, okay? This is the big 3. This is Mr. Romando, the principal, Mr. Marty, the school disciplinarian, and Mr. Weisenborn, I don't know what he did, all right? But basically, they were in charge, okay? And we got hit with all 3 of them, and we thought, what did we do wrong? And they are like really pissed. And you guys are flaunting the fact that you're playing hooky, because I know you weren't in school earlier today. So go to my office right now, says Mr. Romando. So we get to the office, and I'm thinking, what is under his hat, I mean, it's the last day of school. And he comes in the office, and he starts reading us the riot act. And he has been saving this up, because we represent something to him that he does not like, and he's going to draw a line in the sand on it. He says to us, I am sick of you defying authority, right? And you're not getting away with it anymore. You guys are a bunch of wise asses with smart mouths, okay? I've handled a lot of bad kids in this school, but you know what? I can tell what they're going to do next. They're going to yell at a teacher, they're going to get in a fight, they're going to lose their books and not going to do their homework. But you guys, it's a lot worse, because you guys are sneaky, right? You guys want to undermine authority, and all that's patriotic, yeah, that's you, Arkish, and moral and clean and good and honorable. And I am giving you a black mark that's going on your record. 1, 2, 3 black marks on your record. And these records will follow you for the rest of your life. And thinking back on it, Mr. Armando had seen a lot of kids come through Fort Lee High School. He'd been a principal for 15 years probably already. And he knew that our class, and we were different. He knew that the 60s were here. And he had seen the change. And he did not like it. And he did not like what we stood for. And he certainly did not believe in the generation gap. He wanted to pull that generation gap. And he was going to stop us because we were like guerrilla fighters in the War of the Youth, okay? Because it was the 60s and the baby boomers were starting their path towards taking over. He's going to draw a line in the sand. And it's taken me all these years to figure out why he was so mad on that day. Anyway. We saw him again on the night when we graduated. We're kind of ambivalent about the whole thing. That's that word again. And I don't even remember how we celebrated the fact that we had, graduated from high school. So I didn't see him again for like 20 years. I didn't go to the 10th reunion. I went to the 20th. And I got to say, I was feeling pretty good about myself. I was already, making a living as a director. And I'd gone really early in the day to help hang all the decorations and stuff so I could see a lot of my friends. I really wanted to see everybody. And it was a lot of fun. And so many of them had kids who were 14, 15 years old. I had been married like 5 years and we didn't have a child yet. So, and I was still totally in the middle of my career, beginning of my career. But, they played a lot of the songs from our years and they had which was great to dance to them, and they had a rock and roll trivia contest. Guess who aced that one, right? Okay, so halfway through the evening, I've had a drink or two, and I see Mr. Armando across the room, and I've been seeing as he's watching me, and now he seems to have this opportunity, and he comes across the room, and he comes up to me, and he says, Alan Arkush, and he points to my, I'm wearing a pin. They gave us pins with our pictures on it, I remember you. You were pretty original, okay? I said, thank you, Mr. Armando. He says, and you know what? You turned out okay, We are so proud of you because I turn on the TV and I see your name on that TV show, Moonlighting. What does a director do, actually? And St. Elsewhere and L.A. Law, your name is all over the TV. And I said, well, thank you. And I says, I heard that you directed a movie called Rock and Roll High School. And I like to think that all of us at Fort Lee High School contributed to you making that movie, that we inspired you, right? And I'm thinking, okay, so Mr. Armando has not seen this movie. Otherwise, he would know that the principal in the movie, Miss Togar, talks in the same phrases that Mr. Armando does. This is going on your permanent record, a record for the rest of your life, all that kind of stuff. And at the end of the movie, I blow up the high school. And he doesn't know this. So I say to him, Mr. Armando, I got to say, Fort Lee High School was indeed the inspiration for Rock and Roll High School. He goes, I knew it. And shake hands, and that's the last I've ever seen of him. Isn't that interesting? Not going to make any comment about it but I often think of that, okay? All right. So I've been burying the lead, okay? That expression in journalism? Remember Thomas Wolfe here and the little chapters and stuff, and he observed. Now we're about to look at another chapter in my life between high school and college. My grandparents gave me a trip to Israel. That's why this is called Israel 66, okay? Now, my grandparents had been Zionists their whole lives. They'd come to America in the 20s, and by the late 20s, they already started visiting Israel. This is Regina, this is Herschel, and they were so proud when I was born because the state of Israel was born like a week later. And I was always associated in their minds with the state of Israel. And I'd been to Hebrew school, I'd gone bar mitzvahed on the anniversary of the state of Israel, I'd gone to confirmation, I went to Young Judea Youth Group, and I'd actually been to a couple of Zionist youth camps. And so it was inevitable that, they thought I would be a Zionist. And since I graduated from high school, it was time for me to go to Israel, and graduate into being a grown-up Zionist. And one of the things about this tour that was important to them was the fact that it was going to go to a kibbutz, which is a collective farm in the desert. And it was the farm where my grandfather's greatest hero lived. And that man was David Ben-Gurion. Now, David Ben-Gurion had emigrated to what was then called Palestine in 1906, and the British controlled it. And David Ben-Gurion had this vision, along with other men, that there should be a Jewish state in Palestine. And he worked for the next 35 years for this to happen, 35 more, 40 years for this to happen. He lived in the United States and organized all these American Jews to raise money, and there was going to be a Jewish state in Israel, and he helped fight the British hand-to-hand combat to drive them away and make it so that was not worth their while. And he was the one that when, like in the movie Exodus, when that ship comes full of people trying to emigrate to Israel from Europe, he was the one who made sure that they got in, and he wrote the Israeli Declaration of Independence. He was also the first prime minister of Israel. All right? Could there be two bigger icons side by side than JFK and Ben-Gurion? And also he did this amazing thing where he confronted the German government and negotiated them to admit that there had been a Holocaust and that they were responsible, and they gave reparations to the Jews who had lost family members or lost their lives have been torn up by this. I mean, this guy is George Washington in Israel, and I'm going to get to see the kibbutz where he lives. So there's a lot of excitement about this. Okay, so to set a little tone of how this came into my life, remember I said I had gone to Zionist youth camp, and I had had some good experiences, with all these Zionists and some not so good ones, and this is one of the really good ones. Okay, this is a Camp Kinderveld that was built in the 20s. Okay, this is a very famous Zionist youth camp. Okay, it was a huge success. It's in the Catskills in a place called Lake Kiamisha. Okay, this is Lake Kiamisha. Okay, this is like in the 60s this picture was taken. And Camp Kinderveld had a lot of activities and was tremendously popular. And basically all the kids from all the city areas whose parents wanted to get them out of the tenements in the city and get a little sunshine sent them up to this camp. And it was so popular. And there's so many, famous people went there, not from famous before that, but, have gone on, And, there's nothing, the Jews are achievers, that they added another camp alongside it in the 30s called Unzer Camp. And what that camp was bungalows for adults, okay? And the adults would get to eat in the commissary with all the kids and stuff. So it was a great way for adults to keep their eye on their kids. And it made a very convivial, family-like atmosphere. And they get to see the shows and plays that the kids put on and all that kind of stuff. Now, the thing about this place is that this camp is the Jewiest place on earth, okay? You hear this song? This is Mickey Katz. This is how they woke you up in the morning, right? They play this on the loudspeakers really loud at 7 in the morning. Here's Mickey Katz. He did Yiddish comedy records. This is She'll Be Coming Around the Catskills When She Comes, but he also wrote Borscht Riders in the Sky, The Poiple Knish Eater. I mean, he's a funny guy, all right? And I have to show you another one of his albums because that's the cover. I love this cover. This has on it, Don't Let the Schmaltz Get in Your Eyes. Now, Mickey Katz had a son who changed his name to Joel Grey, okay? Joel Grey, is the star of Cabaret. He's the narrator. And Joel Grey has a daughter named Jennifer, and Jennifer becomes an actress who plays a character named Baby, who is the star of the best movie ever about the Catskills, Dirty Dancing. Full circle, right? Full circle in the Catskills. Now, they'd play this in the morning, wake us up, and they'd serve salami and eggs. I told you, this is like the Jewiest place on earth. A lot of food, and it had to be good. And I'm telling you, they had really good food. They'd serve pot roast with potato pancakes. I can see it now. And on some nights, you had noodle kugel with pot cheese. And my favorite, on Sundays, they had what they called Jewish chicken chow mein. I couldn't find a real picture of it, but it looked something like this. And, even though we had Hebrew lessons first thing in the morning, then Jewish history, and then we'd sing Yiddish songs and other songs. We did have swimming in the afternoon, and I showed you that shot of Lake Kayamisha. I actually swam across Lake Kayamisha when I was 9 years old, okay? I had a really good time that summer. See, I was kind of a minor celebrity because my father had gone there and my uncle had gone there. And my father, and I guess the guys in his bunk, had earned a place in history for pulling all the pranks they did. When I asked my father about it, he had a million things to tell me about how they behaved there and all these stories and stuff. So that was kind of nice. You know what? In the 80s, my father and I are out to dinner on the Upper East Side, some fancy Chinese restaurant, where else? And in walks a director whose work, I love. The 12 Angry Men, Dog Day Afternoon, Network. It's Sidney Lumet. Serpico, Sidney Lumet is in the room, and he sits down, and I say to my dad, you see that guy over there? That's Sidney Lumet. And my father goes, Sid Lumet? I said, no, Sidney Lumet. And he goes, yeah, Sid Lumet. Sid Lumet was in Camp Kindervelt with me. He was that guy who helped me do all those gags and stuff. You want to meet Sid Lumet? Let's go over and say hello to Sid. I haven't seen him since Camp Kindervelt. I got really uptight, okay? It just rubbed me the wrong way to my everlasting, shame. And I stopped my father from going across the room to see Sid Lumet. We had dinner, and I never actually got to meet him. And now I'm really sorry. I should have not been so sensitive. Should have gone and seen Sid Lumet. All right. So another, when I was in 11th grade, I'd gone to another camp called Tel Yehuda, and it was too much prayer and too much Hebrew, and I really had a bad time, and I left a month early, okay? So that was on my mind. But now, I love my grandparents, and they had, here I was going to Israel, and I was pretty excited about it, and I said goodbye to, Regina and Herschel, and here I was out ready for, orientation, standing with a suitcase, all my clothes had my name sewed in them, and I had this big thick book, a big thick pile of papers with all the relatives I was supposed to look up, and I was about to enter orientation in a hotel in where else? The Catskills. And this is the kids. This is everyone on that tour, okay? Really nice kids from all over the tri-state area. My age, had gone to, we're going to college, or we're in college, or we're juniors in high school, all about that same age. And, this is the kind of organization that takes its orientation really seriously, okay? This was like 4 or 5 hours of this, of like, we were carrying the importance that we were be responsible for what the Israelis in the Holy Land think of American Jews, and we had to behave ourselves with comportment and a huge list and mimeo sheets of do's and don'ts and all that. And then they went step by step to all the places that we'd be visiting. We were going to climb Mount Masada, which is a famous place where there was a battle that went on for months and months and months, and we were going to see where Moses parted the Red Sea, right? Where the burning bush was and everything, and the 12 tribes of Israel escaped from the Pharaoh. That was just, and on and on and on, all these important places, and we were going to get to spend a week on an agricultural kibbutz, okay? The kibbutz is like a collective farm, and there were many of them in Israel that went up because of the fact that they didn't have an infrastructure for food and stuff when Israel started. So they had all these kibbutzes and stuff that were farms, and the farms would be self-sustaining. And this process still continued, the 18 years later, and was very successful. Little socialist farms, and we were going to get to work side by side with the Israelis on this farm. And we'd have 2 free weekends, and the finale for the summer is we would get to visit the kibbutz where David Ben-Gurion lived. So there was a lot of excitement about this. Now, any questions? And this geeky kid with big glasses, raises his hand and he says, "Yes! Are there any good radio stations in Israel? Because you see, I really like the Kinks, and I want to make sure I get to hear the new Kinks song when it comes out, and a new Beatles album." And that's how I met Ron Klein. Ron Klein and I were friends for 50 years. It was like love at first sight, right? This crazy kid just standing up and with a straight face asking about would we be able to hear Kinks albums in Israel, right? Ron and I are soul brothers, okay? We couldn't have been a better pair, He is like wired and high end. And let me tell you, traveling with Ron, it's like traveling with Harpo and Chico Marx combined in one, with more energy, Ron grew up in Chicago, and I better turn this down a little bit, much as I hate to. He grew up in Chicago, and his father owned a bead store, and this is it. It's called International Bead and Novelty, and that's their filing system, okay? You see that filing system? There is actually an order to it, says Ron. I've worked in that store, and all you end up doing all day is, "Ron, where's the rhinestones?" That's like the inside of Ron's head, okay? So, and he was someone who loved people. And he was very outgoing that way. And we got to meet so many people because of the way he was. And he was a soulful person. Here's a picture of him in London in the early 70s, Now, Ron was also in a band in high school, which I learned on the ride back from the resort to Kennedy Airport. And the band was called the Bondsmen. And he played the entire Bondsman set on the seat for me. He was a drummer. He was Ringo of the Bondsmen. And the Bondsmen had won this big talent contest, and they were seen by the great chess artist, Bo Diddley. And Bo Diddley had taken the Bondsmen under their wing. He actually gave them a motor scooter and one of these guitars and recorded a couple songs with them. Now, that was pretty cool. But even cooler was the fact that on those songs, Bo Diddley's sister sat in and played. And I'm talking about the Duchess. All right? How about that? Look at that guitar. She played that guitar and she played the maracas. And when you listen to Mona, that's the Duchess on the maracas. So Ron had definite creds and he played the entire set for me. And by the time we got to the airport, we were like blood brothers. Here he is. Okay. So now we're at the airport and we're going to get on the plane. Before I tell you about the plane, while I got your attention, let's talk about the Kinks and why you see someone like Ron would be so obsessed with them, because I am too. You really got me as like the first metal song, and so is All Day and All the Night. And then they did a big change, Tired of Waiting for You, which has this sense of longing in it, and social satire with Well-Respected Man. And on this album, which is called King Controversy, has a great blues adaptation called Milk Cow Blues, and a song that, where have all the good times gone? Now, how could someone who's 20 years old write a song with so much loss for the past? It reminds you a little bit of the song Lush Life, which another 19-year-old wrote, who later went on to co-write with Duke Ellington. But how does someone have that kind of maturity? And it's definitely Ray Davies. Where's Ray in this picture? There's Ray. Okay. Now, Ray is an observer of life. And this was the big song of that summer, Sunny Afternoon. And the rest of this album has about characters, about people that Ray knows. There's a session man and there's all these things. Ray is an observer of people. And as he grew as an artist, he started making more and more excellent records. This is something else by the Kinks, and has, probably my favorite Kinks song, everyone's, Waterloo Sunset. And he had this sort of, I think the expression is gimlet eye, you know what I mean? He kind of looked at things and saw them for what they were, and he decided to do a whole album about life in a small English village. and captured the soul of these people on this record. It was very un-rock and roll, you know, and yet it was rock and roll, and it was smart and it was observant. And when he was finished with the town here, he went into the pub in Muswell Hill where he grew up and wrote this whole album about the people and the middle class and lower class people who lived in Muswell Hill. And from there, he branched out and did this great album, which has the song Hollywood Boulevard. You can see all the stars as you walk down Hollywood Boulevard. In between, they had a huge hit with Lola about a cross-dresser, you know. So Dave was, you know, Ray was fearless. He was funny, too. I mean, right? Funny. And he was soulful, and when he had a crisis in his life, he wrote this album called Misfits, which is about his place in the world. And I really identified with this album when it came out in the mid-'70s, when I felt a little lost. This album served me well as Sleepwalker, which was the result of after Misfits. When he came to who he was he just walking through his life and being controlled by things like jukebox new music, okay? So, I mean, all this stuff is Kink stuff, okay? And he still records today, and I want to recommend that you go out and get this album, this Ray Davies album, Working Man's Cafe. It's about 4 or 5 years old, and this one's called Americana, and this one's a year old, because as we age, Ray has aged, and Ray's intelligence and reading of life has continued through the years, and you will not be sorry, because he is singing about you and me, okay? I believe strongly in Ray Davies and the Kinks. Okay, so Ron and I are at the airport, and we're about to get on the airplane to go to Israel. And we're thinking, you know, there's going to be more of these Zionist youth kids, you know, on this airplane. And as we get on the plane, we couldn't have been more wrong, because there was 3 other tours booked on the same flight. It was going to be like a midnight to 2 a.m. flight from JFK to Tel Aviv. And sure enough, as we get on the flight, we see it's packed with kids. There was 3 tours from California, and these were wild kids, okay? These were California girls from wealthy Jewish families whose parents were worried that they would be hanging out on Sunset Strip. These are our kind of girls, because they had been to all the nightclubs on Sunset Strip, and they had seen the Byrds and the Doors, bands we hadn't even heard of they had seen already, and there had been riots on Sunset Strip, and their parents said, we're getting you out of LA and we're going to put you in the Holy Land. And so the trip to the Holy Land became where the boys are, okay? It was like, have you seen this movie? Because they all go to St. Petersburg in this movie for spring break. We were going to Israel with the same attitude, you know. Connie Francis is great in this movie. So is Paula Prentice. It's her first movie. This is a guilty pleasure for me. This is a really, really funny, good movie. So just plugging that in the middle of all this. So we are on the plane, and we go and we land, you know, and the next couple of days the tour starts. And it's a, you know, pretty wonderful experience to be there. You know, let me just show you. There's Ron, and there's me, okay, on this tour. Now we've seen the Wailing Wall and Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Center, and the Sea of Galilee. And when some pattern developed on this, where we would get to these places, and they were extremely moving, and you know, it was great. You were living in history. In Mount Masada, the same thing. But about halfway through whatever lecture they were giving us, Ron would wander off and motion for me, and we would both wander off, because like we've heard these lectures since Hebrew school. And Ron would start talking to people, to any people. You know, Ron wanted to know about everyone. And this was one of the great lessons I learned from him that summer. This is why this summer became the best summer of my life, because I met thousands of people through Ron, and he could just go up to anyone and start a conversation, especially girls who he thought were cute and were from other countries and were wearing, you know, little shorts and stuff. And we went everywhere, and he'd talk to families, and we'd sit and have falafel with them, and then we'd join up with our tour, okay? Now, we toured by bus, and we drove everywhere by bus. And luckily, the bus had a radio, and you could tune into the national rock and roll station, and it had a speaker in the ceiling of the bus. And we used to sit in the seats underneath the speaker, which is right by the back door. And we used to say there's only 3 permanent seats on this bus. Mine, Ron's, and the driver. And we would lead these sing-alongs on the bus as we went around Israel, and it was great. And it was time, though, to go to our first kibbutz. It was time for us to sort of work at this kibbutz. And the kibbutz we went through, now again, I filled you in on what a kibbutz is. This one was a agricultural kibbutz, and they had a lot of, they had chicken farms and bananas, okay. Now, we were going to be working side by side with Israelis. We were going to help contribute to the state of Israel. The Israelis saw it differently. The Israelis saw us as really soft white kids, privileged Jewish kids from the suburbs, and they were going to kick our ass. They were going to teach us what it was like to really be a Jew. It was like Philip Roth talking about the Jews in Jersey and the Jews in Israel. And it's as if they're different people, and it was certainly true, because on that very first morning, they woke us up at 5 in the morning, gave us a cup of tea and 2 pieces of toast, and took us out to the chicken house. And we walked into this chicken house, and this chicken house, in my mind, is about the size of a small Walmart or something. And there are thousands and thousands of chickens in it. It looks something like this, but this one looks cleaner and nicer, because all along the floor of this is liquid chicken shit. All the chickens have shit out the bottom of their cages, and the pipes that gave them water and everything, and were all leaking. So you just were in chicken shit up to your ankles. And you were told to go all the way down to the end, and when you got there, this Israeli guy handed you 6 chickens, like bang, right that in your hands, right? By their feet, they were upside down, and they had been woken up, and we had been woken up, and they were pissed, these chickens. And you learned, they were pecking at you and everything, and the first ones that Ron got, just this diarrhea kind of string of shit right across his t-shirt, and he goes, oh, I want to wipe it off, and the Israeli guy says, no, don't wipe it off, it's a lucky sign. And these are heavy, these chickens, and you got to carry them the length of this chicken place all the way out to a truck outside, where you give them to another Israeli who puts them inside the truck, and then off you go with the chickens. Now, this was heavy work, and we did this for 6 hours, and these chickens, they were trying to peck at you and everything, and you had it all scurried up and everything, and after about 4 hours, you can't do 6 anymore. Your arms are so tired, you're doing 2, and in the last hour, before lunch, you're doing 1. So now, our little Jewish triceps are all worn out, and they took us out, took us to lunch. And we smelled so bad that the whole kibbutz made us sit outside, We had to sit at our own table because we stunk. And that afternoon, we were given another job, which is we had to inoculate thousands of the baby chicks. They actually came in egg cartons. And you'd open up the egg cartons. Instead of eggs, it would be live baby chicks. And you pick them up and you stick this needle in them because you didn't want them to catch pox, It's probably chicken pox, right? I'm guessing, right? And you inoculated them, and that's what we did for a couple more hours. And then we were supposed to go to a lecture and a Hebrew class, which we kind of tuned out on. And after the first day, we kind of just went back and fell asleep. So we did the chicken thing for 2 days, okay? And then the third day, after they woke us up and we had our tea and stuff, and it's still dark out, they take us out to this big truck with this giant mound of dirt, and they go, okay, get up on there, and this is dirt, there's all these buckets, and when we get up there, we realize, this isn't dirt, this is dried chicken shit, okay? And they're taking us out to the banana fields, okay? Because the big agricultural crop here is bananas, and this was a cycle. okay? The chickens made the fertilizer. The fertilizer was tossed on the bananas, right? And everyone was happy but the chicken. And us, because we had to carry these buckets of chicken shit all the way into here to another Israeli who would dump it around the banana plates, and then because he could, he would throw the buckets as far as he could and make us retrieve them, and we carried them back out to the truck and get 2 more. And we did this for 6 hours. Now, when you start in the morning, you know, they have watered these at like 3 a.m. So when you get there, it's actually kind of cool and pretty and stuff. But by about 9 or 10 in the morning, it turns steamy underneath these with the hot sun overhead. And it's full of bugs and everything. And you are sweating like, you know, you're in a Warner Brothers movie on a, you know, in a jungle, okay? And lunch, got to sit by ourselves, okay? So this is what the week was like. And, you know, it was interesting and it was really hard work. And although we bitched about it, we actually felt good. And the Israelis kind of got to like us a little bit. And something else happened that week. They had these Arab kids there, and we were talking to them, and we asked them if they had any hashish. And they actually sold us. They're probably way overpriced. You know, this crappy hashish. And Ron and I smoked hashish. It was the first time I had ever gotten high on anything like that. And then we went to have tea with everyone. And when we poured the tea, we were so high. The tea didn't go straight down. It went sideways. And we started laughing hysterically. And it was like Alice's Mad Tea Party and so forth. Okay, but at the end of the week, they were going to have a talent show. And they had it every Sabbath. You know, in the evening, after services, everyone would get together and sing Israeli folk songs and stuff, you know. And so Ron and I decided that we were going to enter the talent show, okay? And that he decided that we were going to sing Day Tripper, okay? That I would be the George guitar part, and he would be the vocal for Paul and John, and we would both have tambourines. I don't know where he came up with the tambourines. We'd both be Ringo. So we get up in front of everyone there, and I am singing this. Bow, 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 and Ron is hitting the tambourine, right? And I had the tambourine, and now these crazy American kids are whirling dervishes on the stage, taking the easy way out, you know, got a good reason. And the Israelis are looking at us like, these kids are nuts. But it was infectious. You know what I mean? We're 18 years old. We're having the time of our lives. And we soon got the whole kibbutz singing, oh, long to find out. I found out. And at the end of Day Tripper, we did the final smash, boom. They give us a standing ovation. How about that? And I will always have that memory inside my head. And I think right now is a good place to cut that summer in half, because what's ahead of me is the 2 free days, the 2 free weekends that we have traveling around Israel. And we get to see our own trees. Some of you know what that means, and the big climax to the summer. So see you next week for those.